You're listening to the Just Japan podcast. Everything you want to know about Japan.
Well, hey there, folks, and welcome to episode 206 of the Just Japan podcast. I'm back a few days late. My name's Kevin O'Shea, and I am a Canadian, a long-term expat who's been living in Asia for 22 years now, almost. And this week, I'm a few days late. Just want to apologize, but I've got a fantastic episode for you, probably something you've never heard of before. Today, we're going to be talking about Chikara Ishi. And Chikara Ishi is strength stones, or the traditional stone lifting in Japan. And this is something that I've heard a little bit about in different cultures. For example, in the Basque region of Spain, stone lifting is something that's traditionally there. Of course, in Scotland, stone lifting was a way of training warriors and showing the strength and veracity of a warrior, kind of proving their mettle, I suppose, and showing what they can do. I came across a YouTube series a few months back called Strength Unknown, which is put together by World's Strongest Man, Martins Licis. And it's a really fantastic YouTube series where the World's Strongest Man from 2019 travels around the world finding different amazing feats of strength and trying them. And he went to Japan. And there was a neat connection, which we'll talk about in the interview, about finding this kind of traditional stone lifting, which is basically a piece of unknown history almost now in Japan. It's kind of a lost sport. So after watching this video, I was able to contact David Dunlap, who is our guest this evening, and he is an American who is based in Osaka, Japan, and he's also a strongman, and he's got a fantastic Instagram, and I went through his Instagram and saw all this incredible stone lifting that he's doing at different temples in Japan, and I just had to talk to them. I had to talk to him. Now, of course, you guys know that I have a connection to the Kansai. I lived in Kobe for 10 years. But one thing you might not know, because if you haven't been following me, obviously this podcast took a long hiatus. But in the past year and some, I have become really passionate about strength training. And I'm hoping at some point, although I'm not young anymore, but to do some strongman training. It's hard right now where I'm based. It's hard to find a gym that has the equipment to do that. But I've been trying to do a little bit on my own. But I spend a lot of time in my week doing strength training. And this is something that really speaks to me. It's really cool. It's got a neat Japanese history connection. It's got a connection to the strength training that I do now. So enjoy this interview. It's something really different. Even a lot of Japanese people I know had no idea about this. My wife didn't know. A lot of people I've been chatting with on X had no idea. Japanese people had never heard of Chikara Ishi. So check out my conversation with David Dunlap, known as Nobei Power as well, and it's time for you to learn something really new, fascinating, and interesting about Japanese culture. Another episode of the podcast is here, and I've got a very special guest to chat with us about something really interesting and fascinating, and something that's kind of new on the radar for me. It's very cool. So today on the podcast, I've got David Dunlap. It's great to meet you. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me to talk about this not so well-known part of Japan.
Which is exactly why I wanted to talk to you, because it's definitely, I can do in my little way. It's a not so well-known part of Japan that hopefully I can help share a bit of a light on. So David, I was wondering, first of all, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit of your, I suppose, Japan origin story. How did you find yourself in Japan?
Okay. How old am I? I'm almost 38. I first came to Japan when I was, I think, 24, 25 as an exchange student. I was in college for a very long time doing a bunch of different things. And I wound up doing linguistics and Japanese. Okay. And that's what brought me to Japan as an exchange student in 2010, 2011. and I studied in Kobe at Kobe University, and that's what got me here the first time.
Okay.
And I lived here as a student, and I thought, oh, this is a pretty cool country. I want to try living here as just a member of society, not a student, because as a student, you're kind of in this little bubble.
Yeah.
It's not real life, I guess, in a way, because it's very different to be a college student. So I wanted to come back to work and just see what it was like. So I did come back about 2 or 3 years later. And I worked as an English teacher for a while. I worked at some craft beer bars. I was unemployed.
Okay.
I did all. Yeah, I had a really strange time in Japan. And then right before I left Japan, and I'm back now, but right before I left Japan, I met the woman who is now my wife. And that would eventually bring me back here. But I went to the U.S. in search of different work, and I ended up actually working for the Pokemon Company, translating the video games.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so I worked on the most recent Switch title, which is Scarlet and Violet. I translated for, I think, about 12 characters in the game.
Wow.
And I translated the card game and a bunch of different stuff. But then just family stuff brought me back to Japan this time, and this is where I've wound up. We've decided to be here for good. So
cool. And you're in Osaka right now.
In Osaka. Yes.
Cool. So that's really, that's one thing I was curious about. When I watch your videos on your YouTube channel, I have to admit you've got some pretty good Japanese chops. So as I listened to your Nihongo, I was like, wow, I'm jealous of the way he speaks. And I was kind of wondering what it was that, obviously when we meet people, I was in Japan for 10 years, and you meet some people who speak, foreigners to Japan who speak Japanese very well. And you meet some who've been there for 20 years and can say konnichiwa, and that's about it. And then everyone in between. So, you were there as you studied Japanese in university and attended Kobe University. So that kind of explains where you got your start with that. Very cool.
Yeah. The study started in school, and I just kind of took off running on my own. Yeah,
nice. So, I guess what's really connected with the topic tonight that we're going to get into, Chikara Ishi, you're interested in strongman sports and strength training, and that's very connected. Everyone listening to the topic today. So I was wondering too if you could tell us a little bit about your kind of strongman strength training journey as well. How did that happen? How did that begin?
So I'm 37, going on 38 now, and I started strength sport, not strongman, but strength sport when I was about 28 or so. So it's been almost a decade. And I was doing powerlifting for a while, which, for those listening, if you don't know, is just squat, bench, and deadlift. You compete in those 3 lifts. Whoever can lift the most wins. And that was fun, but it was kind of boring for me. A lot of people love it and do it forever, but for me, it was kind of boring. And I looked for something a little bit more exciting. And that's how I found strongman, where you do all sorts of crazy stuff, where you pick up rocks and you pull trucks and whatever, all this ridiculous stuff that we do in strongman. And that was actually, just about a year and a half ago is when I actually started competing in strongman.
Okay.
I started training for strongman when COVID hit, because the gyms were closed and I had to figure out a way to train. And I was living in the 5th floor of an apartment in Seattle, and I couldn't have a gym. I couldn't have a barbell, whatever, in this apartment. So I just bought some sandbags, these big, bulky, weird things, and started lifting them, kind of watching strongman videos for motivation. And that's what got me into it. And then about a year and a half ago, I competed for the first time. And then my second competition was actually the qualifier for World's Strongest Man under 80 kilo.
Okay.
Which is the weight class I compete in. And I did qualify, and I did compete at World's Strongest Man under 80 kilo.
Oh, wow.
Last November. And I wound up a little below middle of the pack, which for me was great. My goal was to not get last, but I did better than about 15 other guys in the weight class, so I felt pretty good about that.
Oh, that's amazing. And, that's so cool.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I am now. I'm still training, still hoping to go back to Worlds. This year I've got a knee issue going on that's keeping me from competing, but I'm hoping next year I can go back to Worlds.
That's so cool. So for me, I guess I've always kind of seen strongman stuff from time to time. You see those competitions that would pop up on TV of people pulling airplanes and stuff like that. And you're like, what the hell is this? That's so entertaining. I must watch more. But for me, I really got into strength training not that long ago. Actually, I used to do it when I was younger. I'm in my late 40s now. I got about 10 years on you. But I started really seriously getting into strength training about a year ago. And it's kind of become all encompassing for me when I'm not working. And I kind of now live in the Inaka of Malaysia now. So I luckily have a gym in the building I live in, and which is part of my apartment. It's free. It's a pretty big gym that's often empty. So I love it. So it's what I do after work every day. And then I've really gotten into watching so much strongman, and really it's become kind of a big, I don't know, just I take it all in. I love watching Brian Shaw and the entertaining Eddie Hall, and just all these other characters. And yeah, so, and then of course I came across the series Strength Unknown and on YouTube, and fell down that rabbit hole, which is kind of neat because I'd lived in China before, and I saw Martins had done this really neat video in Shanghai and some different ones, and it was pretty cool. So I guess, we'll jump into this right now. What I wanted to talk about today is I guess kind of a lost art, or this or that in Japan. And it's called Chikara Ishi. Am I right with that?
That is correct.
So could you tell us, what is that? What is Chikara Ishi?
Well, it's literally, the two characters in Japanese is power or strength and stone. And the idea is that it's stones that test your strength. And stone lifting is big all around the world. There's culture of stone lifting in Iceland and Ireland and Scotland and England and the USA, and mainly in Europe, but a little bit in the USA too. And apparently also in Asia. And just no one talks about it, and it's been forgotten about. And it was so big in Japan in the 1800s that there are, as of right now, the number of stones we know of in Japan that are documented historical stones is around 16,000. So to put that into perspective, there might be 100 in Scotland, which is really well known for stones. Mm-hmm. So that's, a good bit more than Scotland, but no one's heard of them, which is wild.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that they were used for in the past. It wasn't just like people going to the gym, but for example, fishermen would, in some towns, they would have a bunch of stones set up, and the weight of the stone you could lift would determine your wages. So if you could lift the heaviest stone, you get paid the most because you could do the most work, was the idea. If you could only lift a really light stone, you wouldn't get paid very much because they wouldn't think you could do much work with pulling in the nets and doing all this stuff with manual labor. There was even the idea that if you couldn't lift a certain weight stone or a certain amount of weight to your shoulder, that you weren't fully an adult. And that weight, I believe, was 60 kilo. So it's not that heavy, but they still had this idea where if you couldn't lift that, then you're not an adult male. You can't do manual labor. So all of these things kind of tied into Chikara Ishi. And they just became ubiquitous in Japan. They were everywhere, and people used them to train. People used them to set their wages. Mm-hmm. And there were even traveling strength shows where these strongmen, basically ancient strongmen, would go around and put on shows. And they even had a ranking, like they have a ranking now with sumo wrestling. And you would have the same ranks, actually, ozeki, everything that you have in sumo now, but for stone lifting. So, yeah, that's something that we learned recently. This is just mind-blowing, that it was so big in the past that they even had the same rankings. They had the big sheets of paper like they have with sumo that have all the names on them of the people that competed. And it's just wild to think that was that big just 200 years ago.
That's fascinating because, last night I was, in the living room watching on my TV the Strength Unknown episode. Chikara Ishi, and we watched that. My family, I'd watched it before that, just like that. It just came out on Sunday, and I watched it the day before on my computer, and I was like, my son, he's starting to train weights a little bit with me. He's 13 and a half, and I'm like, oh, let's watch this. And my wife is Japanese. My wife is actually from Osaka, and she was kind of like, I've never heard of this. This is really interesting. And actually, ironically enough, it just clicked how I learned all about this, where this came into play. I had just been getting into watching Strength Unknown and had actually shown my wife a Strength Unknown video in Shanghai, where those guys were had these big kind of stones they throw up and catch and stuff. And Small World, after all, in the Strength Unknown episode of Chikara Ishi, where you guys visited a shrine that I believe was in Akashi or outside of Akashi, that really kind of the priest was wearing white robes, and they had the nice statue. So that priest, his daughter knows my wife, and she had posted on her Facebook. She had been there that day and had taken pictures of you guys filming, and she put it on her Facebook. There's these strongmen from America are here filming at my father's shrine. And my wife's like, oh, wow, look at this. And she's like, Kevin, you're interested in this strength stuff. Do you know who these people are? And I'm like, I looked and I saw, Martins in the group. I'm like, oh my God, he's in Japan. I'm like, oh, and that's kind of, I thought that was very cool. Although I don't know any of the people involved. My wife kind of had a loose affiliation with someone who knew someone who,
that's wild. So that's the head priest. So it's his daughter knows. His
daughter has a son a child the same age as my son, and they used to be in the same baby play group.
Okay. Well,
and they follow each other on Facebook, and it was just like, my wife was like, do you know? And she showed me the picture, and I was just like, wow, that's cool. I can't wait for this video to come out or to see the Strength Unknown videos. Yeah.
Does his daughter work at the shrine?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Okay. Because there was a younger than him woman there who was clearly working at the shrine. I wonder if that was his daughter. I don't know. I don't remember who all was there. There were some people off kind of far away taking video and pictures and stuff, but for the most part, they were staying away to let us do our thing.
She was probably one of those people because she would probably, would be a middle-aged woman. And yeah. But yeah, so, how did you first fall into this? Because on your own YouTube channel, which I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right. Is it Nobei Power? Am I saying that right? Nobei Power on YouTube. On your own channel, you've got these videos that you call the Chikara Ishi Diaries, where you were several months ago starting to, it looks like in the summertime, some really hot days, what you were saying, you were starting to go around and you were finding shrines in the Kansai area that had these power stones, and you were doing some lifting just on your own. You were out there with your vlogging set up and walking around and talking about how damn hot it was. And
it was very hot.
Yeah. So how did you first discover Chikara Ishi?
It was actually while I was still in the U.S. and I was competing as strongman and doing worlds and all that. And in strongman, natural stone lifting is a big part of strongman. It sometimes shows up in competitions, but it's like the essence of strongman. Pick up a weird thing. Yeah. And natural stones are very weird. Every stone is different. Sometimes a lighter stone can be harder than a heavier stone just because it's shaped oddly, or it's round, or it's just thick, and it might be like a porous stone that's really big but doesn't weigh that much. But because it's big, it's hard to pick up, and that's like the essence of strongman. It's weird. You don't know what you're getting into until you actually do. So I was very interested in the idea. Just I didn't have any in Seattle to play with. And since I knew I was going to be moving back to Japan, I started looking around. I was like, I wonder if Japan's got any lifting stones. And I ran into two people. One is a guy his nickname is Sobatsubu. He was in the Strength Unknown with us in Ishikawa. He's about my age. He's 36, 37. And he's just obsessed with stone lifting in Japan. Mm-hmm. So I found him, and he's really trying to spread it. He's been on TV a couple of times. He's been in the newspaper and all, trying to spread the news of Chikara Ishi in Japan. So I found him. And then I also found the professor, who is also in Strength Unknown with us, Professor Takashima. who has written 40 some odd books on Chikara Ishi.
Wow.
And he's got PDFs and stuff online. And I just started researching, and I wanted to know where they are and if there's any in the Kansai area, for example, because I knew I was going to be living in Osaka. And yeah, that's what started it all. I found those two guys, and I'd been talking with Sobatsubu for a long time before I even got back to Japan. And then I got to go meet the professor through Strength Unknown, which was really cool. And that's what kind of kickstarted the journey.
Cool. That is very neat. So folks out there, I'm going to put a link in the show notes. Go follow his YouTube channel, David's YouTube channel. There's a lot of neat stuff of just you going around to these different shrines. And it's really interesting. That's what I found fascinating about this. I've always been interested in history. I've always been interested in exploring the back streets, the shrines of Japan. At one point in my early 30s, I was a long distance runner. So I used to run every little back alley in Kobe, and how many hundreds of shrines that I kind of come across, never knowing that such a thing existed as lifting stones. And I probably at some point seen these stones in different places and just said, hey, look, big rocks. I wonder why they're there. And then I moved on.
You probably did, because a lot of them don't even have anything to say that they're Chikara Ishi. There's just a rock, and you have to know it's a Chikara Ishi or else. Once you see a bunch, you can kind of start to tell which ones are and which ones aren't, because they have very specific shapes. But yeah, no, I can see why you would miss them.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, again, I've had hobbies that have brought me to places like that. Like I was really big into geocaching and stuff like that, where you're kind of often geocachers. Those are the kind of places where they hide geocaches outside of shrines because they want to bring you to those interesting places. So the kind of idea of the geocaching is to come here, find that little hidden thing, and then explore the area around. But okay, so you got into this, this summer decided to start going around and explore. How many do you think you found this summer? How many did you go and lift?
I have personally lifted, oh my goodness, I don't even know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I don't know, about 20.
Okay.
At this point. Some of those were with Martins. Some of those were just alone. Just the other day, I found a set of 5 stones that are a 20-minute bike ride from my home here. Oh, wow. They're in South Kyoto. I live in North Osaka, so South Kyoto is just right over the border.
Okay.
And there's 5 stones just hanging out in this place where no one's there. It's not even a shrine. It's just 5 Chikara Ishi hanging out.
Cool.
So it's really interesting to find them. And oftentimes they'll have characters engraved on them.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them have names, and the names are engraved, or they might just have like Chikara, which is strength, engraved on them, or Chikara Ishi even, to just show off the fact that they're Chikara Ishi. And these 5 that I found recently, and this is very often the case, they were turned upside down. And so you wouldn't even know that they were engraved until you picked them up and flipped them over. Okay. And found the engraving.
Wow.
So it's very interesting that they don't even think about it. They just throw them off in a field somewhere, and they let them rest. And sometimes they're upside down. And
I guess probably a lot of even just Japanese people have no idea what they are now at this point in time, right? In 2023,
I would say most Japanese people don't know it.
Yeah, I mean, so how did you? Okay, so you just did a project with the World's Strongest Man 2019. And how did you guys connect, and how did you get connected with Strength Unknown?
So I knew they were thinking about going to Japan, but I also knew that they didn't have any specific plans. And so I thought this is an opportunity for me, because I know Japan, I know Japanese. At the time I already knew I was going to be moving back. And so I thought, this is great. If they go after I move back, then I can help. I can make this episode really cool. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know how to contact them. I found out later. I mean, I could send them a message on Instagram or whatever and hope they saw it. But as I found out when Martins was here, he doesn't see his messages on Instagram. He's got so many followers and so many people sending him messages that he just doesn't see them most of the time.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
And I did try a couple of times. I tried to comment on their posts or whatever, send messages, and I just didn't see them. But because I got to compete at World's Strongest Man under 80 kilo, I actually ran into Romark, which is Martin's cameraman and friend. I ran into him in the bathroom, actually.
Okay.
It's a very funny story. Romark loves this story too. Romark's using the bathroom. I'm using the bathroom. We're right beside each other. And I just turn to him and I say, I hear you're going to Japan. Do you have any contacts there? And he says, not legit ones. And I say, would you like some? And he said, yes. And as we washed our hands, and then he immediately got out his phone, and then we exchanged numbers and got connected. And yeah, that's what started it.
Wow, that's really cool. So there you go. I mean, I can assume when you reach out to those famous people, or, I think I just checked today, Martins has like almost 400,000 subscribers or followers on Instagram, right? And I'm sure there's just people who adore what he does, and especially with Strength Unknown, messaging him all the time, just saying, hey, what's up? Love your stuff. And, I'm sure there's also people out there who have those big followings who don't even manage their own Instagram, right? They've got a team who does that kind of thing. I'm sure folks like Eddie the Beast Hall or Brian Shaw probably, have those specific staff who do that. Wow. So that's cool. And so they came to Japan and you guys were doing a lot of filming, and I don't know. It's really cool. One of the things that you guys talked about, or you mentioned in the video, and you also mentioned to me on Instagram, is that you're developing a map, or a Google map. And I saw that I saw your Gmail flashed up in the video, that people can send you an email if they're interested. So tell us about that map that you're creating to let folks know where these Chikara Ishi are.
Yeah, so the map is a project that I actually started for my own use.
Okay.
I had no intention of sharing it in the beginning. I just wanted to have a visual representation of where the stones are so I could find them easier. And having them in Google Maps makes it really easy, because when I open my Google Maps, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, but when I open Google Maps, they're on there. And if I'm in a location where there's a stone, I immediately know. And I have some interesting stories about that I'll talk about in a second that'll make that click a little bit better. But the map itself, I had no intention of sharing it until I started making it. It started getting bigger, and I thought, you know what, I should probably share this with people that want to lift these stones. And the reason that I started making it is because the professor, Professor Takashima, he's got books, 40 some odd books on Chikara Ishi. He's got a book on every prefecture in Japan, and it documents where they are, how big they are. He's got pictures of them. It's amazing. But using those books to try to find them makes it really difficult. You can search by city, by prefecture, by town, and that's cool, but it doesn't have the exact address. It doesn't have... It's just really hard to find the stones. And I thought, I'm going to take this information, and that's what I'm using. I'm using his writings to make the map, and making a visual representation, an easy way to be like, okay, I'm here. I'm in Kobe. Are there any stones here in Kobe? Oh, there's one. Yep. I'm going to go lift it. And that's why I started making the map, because I wanted an easy way to find them and go and lift them.
Cool. Very cool. Yeah, I know. And I myself am looking forward to this, because I need to start training, doing these kind of, I've been just doing kind of straight old gym stuff, but I've started recently trying to do kind of more, how shall we say, unconventional lifting of objects and things. And I've got my hands on some sandbags. I'm trying to do more interesting things with like big plates and stuff, and just kind of picking up odd things and working on that. And I've been kind of trying to gather large stones around my school campus and kind of roll them over to a garden that I do some work in. And I know I've got a way to go, but I'm, in the future, like I do spend time in Japan every year, and I'm looking forward to at least attempting some of the smaller stones. And my son is like, yeah, Dad, I'd love to film you trying that. And then he was like,
you have to hit me up. I unfortunately, and for everyone listening that doesn't do strength training, the average Chikara Ishi is about 100 kilo, which is 220 pounds.
Yeah.
Which makes it kind of difficult, because if you just go out looking and you find one, it's probably going to be around 100, give or take. But there are a few. I know of at least two in the Osaka, Kyoto area that are probably more like 60, 70, which are a lot more approachable.
Yeah, I was watching the video where a few were mentioned. That fellow that you talked in the episode of Strength Unknown, he was wearing the yellow T-shirt. He's the enthusiast construction worker, I think, right? And he's trying to spread the word. And he had mentioned like this one is 73 kilos or something. I'm like, okay, I could probably maybe manage that, maybe with a bit more training under my belt. But some of those like 100 kilos is like, well, I could look at it and take pictures of it. Maybe I can roll it over. I've lived in Japan. I lived in Japan for quite some time, and my wife is Japanese, and I spent a lot of time with my Japanese in-laws, my wife's various aunts and uncles, and I worked at a Japanese. It was an international school, but it was a Japanese-run one, so very much a Japanese company. And I think over that time, I learned a lot of how to behave in Japan and how to approach Japanese people, and obviously how to be respectful, because that's such a huge part of life in Japan. So for those who are maybe listening, if anyone's listening, or just kind of general advice, if they were interested in coming to Japan to lift Chikara Ishi, to see them, what advice would you give them to basically behave respectfully and kind of approach this in a proper manner? Because it is definitely something that, I assume you don't want to barge up to a place and just be like, I want to throw some stones around. Yeah.
It's weird because I bet in the past that's exactly how it was and no one thought about it. But now, first of all, the stones are almost always on shrine grounds, which means they're on religious ground, which means if you go to lift a stone, it's fine. You should probably ask permission, but it's fine, of course, to lift these stones if you get permission. But, there might be someone who comes up to pray or, visit the shrine in a religious capacity while you're there. And you have to keep that in mind because you're going to be right beside people who are praying or wishing for like their family's safety or something like this. So you can't be like, people so often do in strength sport. You have to be a little bit more reserved. And I mean, you can get fired up and, no one's going to hate you if you make a little bit of noise, but first of all, you just have to think about being respectful because these are on religious ground. And of course, getting permission. These stones now have owners where they didn't in the past. They do now. They've been dedicated to shrines and temples and different places where they rest. And so if at all possible, you should probably get permission from the shrine or the temple where they rest. And in most cases, if you say, hey, I'm a strength athlete, I'm a strength trainee, I know what I'm doing, I want to try my hand at these stones of strength here, they'll say yes, it's fine. Okay. Just be careful with the stone. But in some cases, even if you explain who you are and what you do, they'll say no. Because these are viewed as historical assets more than tests of strength these days.
Okay, yeah.
And even the professor said he doesn't really want people lifting them. Like he understands if you want to, and he thinks it's fine, but he wants to preserve them. All 16,000 some odd of them. And so that leads to the final point, I guess, which is you often see people shouldering and lifting stones in strongman and then just dropping them from the shoulder or from above the head or whatever. But a lot of the places you'll find these stones, the ground is packed dirt or it's stone or it's concrete, and you can't really do that. And so you have to think about either being really gentle when you put them down, which is very hard because that's what I often end up doing is just having to gently put them down, or bringing some sort of crash pad or something that you can place on the ground, and then you can drop them because the pad's going to take the blow.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, those are the three big points. You have to be respectful of the place because it's probably a religious area. You have to ask permission because these stones have owners, and then you have to be gentle with them because they're viewed as historical assets. It's basically something that should be in a museum, but it's not. So don't crack it. Don't crack it.
Don't crack it, exactly, right? These stones. What I've learned from watching the different videos you've done in the Strength Unknown episode, again, everyone watch it, links below, is that, there is such a rich history with these stones. Some things I've seen in your YouTube channel as well, as you're obviously a part of the strength community in Osaka, in the Kansai region of Japan, and I guess
Greater Japan as a whole. I was wondering if you'd tell us a little bit about the strength community in Japan. I think, for those like me who are kind of new to strength and this and that, to training, and I'm a fan of the sport. You think of Iceland, you think of Norway, you think of Scotland, but you often don't think of Japan. So I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about what the strength community looks like in Japan right now.
I actually have Iceland on my sleeve here. This is actually a stone lifting shirt for Iceland. Japan strength culture these days is very small. Most people in fitness are into like bodybuilding and physique and that sort of thing, which is fine, but it's not strength. Powerlifting is fairly big in Japan, I guess. Okay. relative to strongman, I guess. But strongman is still very, very small. Which is unfortunate because it's what I do. But we're trying. I'm trying to spread the sport. Martins now is really on board. He loves Japan and he wants to come back as often as he can. So he's here to spread the sport. We're trying to make it bigger. But right now, strength in Japan is a very small slice of the fitness community. Yeah. Most people are just trying to lose weight or trying to bodybuild or whatever. And I guess that's true around the world. But like in the U.S., powerlifting and strongman are much bigger than they are here. But it does appear to be growing.
I've seen on your YouTube channel, you did a video recently with Martins where you actually went to a competition that looked very much kind of backyardish or backlot-ish. It looked like it was at a warehouse in I'm not sure where that was exactly, outskirts of Osaka, Akashi, Kobe, somewhere maybe, I don't know. Or wherever that was. But again, it looked very grassroots, shall I say.
Saitama? Was it? This falls out of Tokyo, actually.
Oh, okay. But it definitely looked very grassroots, and it was kind of neat to see. That's where Martins surprised Japan's strongest man, and everyone was so shocked to see Martins there. And it was a great kind of look at the competition there. And there was a lot of people there who were having a fantastic time, who looked, not giant freakish people. They looked like regular people who enjoy strength sports.
Yeah, there were a lot of regular people there. Some of the more top level competitors in the Japanese world of strongman are a little bit bigger, but you aren't looking at like the crazy giants like you see in the world's strongest man, the big competition that Martins won and all. And it's cool because some of these people came from powerlifting. Some came from absolutely no athletic background and just decided to try strongman or strongwoman. And it's really fun to see that they're just enjoying it and having fun. Because I think that's the soul of strongman, really. You, like in powerlifting, you have a very specific goal: squat, bench, deadlift. In bodybuilding, you have a very specific goal. You want to look good. And strongman is just, how well can I pick up these awkward objects that are heavy? Yeah. And it's fun. It's like a strength playground. And so it's fun to see people get into it.
That's very cool. It's something maybe, I don't know, maybe in the future I can try to get into it a bit more here and develop it or something at my school and have some fun with it, maybe with some staff and things like that, get some implements. And, well, you know what, before we wrap up, I want to, of course, ask you to shout out your socials. Where can people find you on social media? Because you've got a lot of great stuff out there, and I've been really enjoying your content. So where is that content?
That content is 100% on YouTube and Instagram. I have nothing else right now. They're both basically the same. YouTube is Nobei Power with a underscore in the middle, and Instagram is Nobei Power with a period in the middle. And Nobei is Nonbei. So Nobei. Either underscore power for YouTube or .power for Instagram.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us tonight.
Thank you. It's nice to be able to spread the word of strength in Japan because it's such a small community, but hopefully it'll grow.
Yeah.
That's the goal anyway.
Absolutely. And it's a great goal for sure.
All right, folks. Well, I want to thank David for coming on the Just Japan podcast. Go follow him on Instagram at David Dunlap, Nobei Power. The link will be below in the show notes. Go follow him on YouTube. He's got a great YouTube channel, mostly in Japanese, which is great. You can hear he's got great Japanese chops, where he does a lot of strength, stone lifting, and other things. So definitely you want to follow him. On all those places. So follow him on YouTube and follow him on Instagram. So again, go check the links below. All there. Everyone, thank you so much for being patient. I'm a little bit late with this episode of the Just Japan podcast. It was the last week of the school term for me. Yesterday was Friday the 15th, and we wrapped up our first term. I'm an international school teacher, and the kids are on holiday. I'm on a holiday for 3 weeks, so I'm looking forward to making more content for you guys. Yeah, so this podcast, by the way, this interview I did with David Dunlap was done just a few weeks ago, and now it's for you guys to listen to. If you are someone who was listening to the Just Asia podcast, I know there weren't many of you, but if you were, you may have heard this interview already a few weeks back. But I know there's a lot more of you listening over here in the Just Japan podcast. So I hope you guys are doing really well. Remember, I'm on holiday now, so there'll be a lot more cool content coming out on my social medias. Follow me on X at MadForMaple. Follow me on Instagram at JLandKev, of course. Check out my YouTube channel at BusanKevin, of course. All those places. I'm also on Blue Sky as well and Threads. All the links will be in the show notes below. Go check them out. Also, I know in the past, many of you made fantastic reviews and ratings on Apple Podcasts and different places where you were listening to this show. I would really appreciate it, if you haven't already, to go and give a rating for the Just Japan podcast. If you've been listening to the last few episodes and enjoying, leave us, a review. It really helps us get noticed again. Once upon a time, many years ago, Apple Podcasts, when they were called iTunes, noticed us and gave us a little push years back, and that really helped the Just Japan podcast. Obviously, the show's been on hiatus for several years now, but we're back, and I plan on being very consistent here. So help us out with those reviews. Again, it really pushes us up in the algorithms. Yeah, so that's it, guys. And thank you so much. Please share this podcast with like-minded friends, folks who like Japan stuff. Go to the back catalog, more than 200 episodes of awesome. Go check it all out. It's there for you to listen to. We're now on Spotify and Amazon Music as well, so hopefully we can broaden our listenership there. In the past, when we were when I was active with the Just Japan podcast, Spotify podcasts were not a thing, and Amazon Music, that wasn't a thing either. So now they are. All right, guys. Well, wherever you are in the world, I hope you're happy. I hope you're healthy, and I'll be talking to you again really soon.